the floor over to Tara.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to see so many wonderful faces. Thank you for joining us today. I am very excited to present our facilitator today, Teresa Headley. I first met Teresa when she came to the Comox MFRC to gift us a copy of her book that she wrote called What's Not Allowed, A Family Journey with Autism. During our meeting, I learned that Teresa was very eager to share her resources and strategies that she has developed to help military families support family members with autism. Teresa is a mother of 3 children, one whom does have autism. Not only is she an educator and author, but she is also a Canadian military spouse. Teresa has worked directly with families and school boards as an autism consultant and advocate. In collaboration with the Family Education Center, she co-designed an interactive online parenting program called Pathways to Potential, Parenting Children and Youth with Autism. We are very pleased to have Teresa here today to share with us practical strategies to help support family members who have diverse needs through a move no matter what age or stage. Please welcome Teresa Headley.
Well, thank you very much, Tara and Aaron. And I'm really pleased to be here today. And I have to tell you that this presentation was both Tara and Aaron's idea. And I think it's terrific that we together create a collaborative toolkit, which will help everyone. And I'm sure you have many good ideas and you can participate and let us know about those at the end as well. So we can together build something that makes it easier for us and our families. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I've got a PowerPoint for you with some, seems to be 2 there. Now why 2? I'm not sure, but we'll do this. There we go. You can see it there? Okay. Yes, can you see the PowerPoint? All good? Okay. So a family journey with autism, supporting military families on the move, and not even on the move at all times. You'll see strategies that are good for home settings as well. So a family relocation toolkit. And now I'm trying to, there we go. Here we are, and we're an armed forces family, like I assume you are as well. And this was about 6 years ago in Ottawa, our last posting before moving here to Comox. And my daughter Heather at the time, son Scott, son Eric, and my husband, who's now retired. And as you can probably see there, we're in front of the National War Memorial. So you must agree that there's no life like it, right? That's what we're told. And like many of you, we have moved a lot. And just to give you a snapshot here, this was back in 2008, and we were moving from Vancouver Island to Ottawa. And our kids then were about, I think, 8, 10, and 12. And this is Scott, this is Heather, and this is Eric. And Eric is my son with autism. And if you even look at this picture here, you can see that Scott and Heather are smiling. Eric is pretty stressed about this move. He's not smiling there, and we'll learn more why. So in the forces life, as you know, you learn to grow with the flow, with the changes and with the different postings, and you try to remain happy and adjust throughout and really reinvent yourself each time. So you've got this armed forces lifestyle, and then you add this other layer. In our case, it's autism. And you may have a child with autism as well, or different diverse needs. So our autism journey began with 3 words. What's not allowed, which is also the title of the book. I whirl around, astonished, and observe Eric pointing to a sign on a nearby post. It is a series of circles with red slashes through them. No littering, no loitering, no skateboarding. And he's pretty excited about this sign. He is pointing at this sign and he is animated, and he is asking what it means. In my relief to hear this little gush of language, I have no idea that these words may be telling me something more, deeper and significant. Obsession with symbols and signs is an autism marker. Now at this point, this was in Barrie, Ontario, just north of Toronto, outside of base Borden, and Eric was around 2, and he had not said very much. His language development was very slow, but he was drawing our attention. There was certainly joint attention. He was pointing to things and wanting to share his world. And normally he would say that's, like that's. And I think as a parent and as a teacher, I was a little concerned that I didn't see the language coming. And so I would label everything. And I'm sure I was doing this. And in the park, there were signs with, as you can see here, with the little symbols. And I'm sure I was saying, that's what's not allowed. And then one day he repeated after me. And so this gave us a really good clue about what was important to our son and what mattered to him. And I should just tell you that we probably took, in these little books here, about 200 pictures. And this was before the age of digital photography. So we were very diligent and kind of had fun with this, collecting pictures that we suddenly saw because of Eric. And it told us that he likes rules, he likes order, routine, certainty, structure, and predictability. These things are important to him. And I think you'll all agree that it's not just about autism or diversity. Oh, I've got little signs coming down. There we go. It's about all of us. And you know, being thrown into this pandemic world, we realize that these things are pretty important. But for those with autism, they're absolutely critical. And we were learning this about our little boy. We didn't know at the time that he had autism. But we did know that if we lived this way and became quite structured and didn't vary the routine very much and made things pretty predictable, that he did well. So we did this. We started to live like this, and they became our family pillars. And I began to write about this orderly life and how we often travel off track and how that's okay, or sometimes completely derail. That off-trail travel is really where the adventure begins. And I like to hold up this frame, and I encourage you all to get a frame, because we find that we reframe things an awful lot in this journey with autism, that sometimes when you go off trail and off track, it's when you learn the most about yourself and about your child. So it's okay. And that it's okay to go off trail. And I found that when I started to write about it, first in a journal and the rough draft for the book, a lot started to make sense. And that's what writing does. It crystallizes things, and it kind of, I think we tap into a different part of our brain, and it lets us know what's important and what things really are all about. So I call this little guy here the epiphany head, or the aha moment. And we're going to have a lot of those in this presentation, so you can keep your eye open for that icon. So what I wanted to do in writing this book is to take all of the ahas that we were discovering and that people were sharing with us from their journey and pay those forward. And so if you can imagine your journey or your life as a game board, and I think we'd agree that Snakes and Ladders is probably a pretty good representation, that we advance forward and we slide back a lot. So my thought is, why start at square one here when you can learn from others and start further ahead on the game board? And just as we did. So I thought, well, I'll help others. And I think what I was really doing too is writing to my former self, to me 16 years ago, and what I would like to know and what I would have benefited by knowing and experiencing. Now I'm just going to pause here and mention that before the book became a book, while it was still a manuscript, Colonel Tella Morrison, who is the Director of Military Family Service, kindly offered to read the entire manuscript and to make a comment and offer her support. So I'm going to show you a little bit of her comment, her endorsement, and it's in the very front of the book. And this is an excerpt from that. The Headley journey portrays the myriad of challenges a military family must embrace on a posting, as well as packing up and moving, at times to the other side of the country. To do so with a child with autism creates a new level of challenges. This story is a portrayal of how love and compassion overcome percentiles and projection. It is at its core a great story of hope, compassion, and resilience. And I thank her very much for her support, and we feel honored to have this at the outset of the book, because it's very much a military journey. So Connection, direction, illumination, and hope. These are the things that I think we're all looking for in life, no matter what journey we're on. And certainly for me and for other parents, knowing that someone else has experienced what I'm experiencing and thinking my thoughts and sharing those emotions is really important, that connection. And the direction part is offering some ways forward, such as what we'll be doing today. Illumination, or the ahas. This is what it means. This is what your child is telling you. And the hope, of course, for the future. I call these the glimmers, and that is why I wrote to offer these as they had been offered to us. So what now? This brings us to today, where we have autism, where change is very difficult, and armed forces, where change is constant. So you have, pardon the pun, opposing forces coming together, which leads to the question, how do I support my child in a life that's filled with uncertainty and change when that's really difficult for that child? So we're going to be building a toolkit together, and when you feel uprooted by a posting, how to integrate yourself at the other end at your new home, and how to make a smooth move from one end to the other. We're going to be talking about 5 building blocks: absorbing the posting message, planning for and managing the house hunting trip, setting up for success in school if your child is school-aged, planning for and managing the physical move, typically in the summer, and setting up for success in the new home. So I'm going to be offering you 4 strategies under each of these building blocks, and you will no doubt have your own. And there are a few more in the article that you received when you registered for the course. The aim is to create a smooth move. And this is really interesting for me to look at perspectives. And we're trying to replace all of the things that change erodes. So change takes away the routine. It takes away predictability. It takes away structure, and it takes away consistency. And for our children, that's a threat. So we're just trying, this is a parent perspective. We're trying to create a smooth move. We know we'll get across the country or wherever, but our children are feeling very unsafe by this. And so really, it intrigues me that it's the 2 different sides of the same coin. The coin being the posting or the transfer, and the perspective being ours and our children's. So we need to understand that we're creating safety for them. And that's what the toolkit strategies will do. They will help children to process and manage change and feel safe at the same time. Now, the approach is really important. We need to be speaking in the language of neurodiversity. And if you ask someone with autism how they think and how they learn, they will probably tell you visually, that they think in pictures. And if you look at the little quote in the book here, my son says, words evaporate like they didn't even happen, just like that. So if I give him a list of things to do and I just use words, it just floats away, he says. I need to use visuals. And so I try to present and teach in pictures, and also use this when I'm presenting and teaching children with autism. In order to reach, we must teach the way they learn. And I kind of liken this to, a cell phone. We have icons on our cell phone because we're going to remember that. We're going to remember what we see, but we probably won't remember what we hear. And I guarantee you after today's presentation, you're going to remember some of the pictures, but you probably won't remember me talking. And that's okay. That's why I'm doing a visual. So let's just rewind for a moment. Change, I think we would agree, is hard. We feel uprooted. All of those things we talked about suddenly feel pretty shaky. And there are a lot of strong emotions that accompany change. There's fear, there's sadness, and there's mixed emotions where sometimes we're not even sure what we're feeling, and that's really unsettling too. The pandemic has taught us how stressful change can be. And here's my son, Eric, and we were part of webinar last year trying to teach people how to cope through the change, especially at the early stages of the pandemic. So how about a military posting? This was in front of our Ottawa house. I've always imagined a posting kind of like this. Almost like the arm of an octopus or a squid, where you have your life and you have all of these connections. And as soon as you're posted, you lift up that arm, and all of those connections that you've made have to be pulled up one at a time. Once again, we are moving, pulling up the carefully tentacled arm that is our Vancouver Island life and moving on. This time, destination Ottawa. So that is what I always keep in mind. And I tell my children this, it's kind of like that. And it makes them able to see it better. So if you have a child with autism or another neurodiversity, another form of neurodiversity, and they depend upon structure, routine, predictability, and certainty, change can feel kind of like this, kind of like unraveling. And that's what my son tells me. It feels like that. And I was told early on to understand how change and those emotions, those deep emotions around change, to understand how they feel for a child with diverse needs, multiplied by 10. Take everything that you're feeling and multiply that. And that will give you the intensity of feeling for someone with autism and how difficult it is. So how critical it is that we do this carefully and thoughtfully. I also discovered that reaction matters. And the way that we approached each transfer, we meaning my husband and myself, from our reaction to our anticipation to managing all of the details, that determined how well the posting, the transfer rolled out. So our children look to us. I call it mirror, mirror. Our reaction was often mirrored by our children. If we saw it as a positive and built it up and marketed it, and you almost have to be a marketer, marketed the change, the move that way, then they felt it was a good thing too. And emotion is contagious, and so is reaction. And we found that we became the template for moving forward. Okay, speaking of which, let's go through the building blocks. And if you have questions, you can jot them down and we'll address those at the end. The first one, of course, you get the posting message. So what we would typically do is try to make this visual. There's that visual teaching again. And this is the first step in processing change. So we have this map in our basement and we kind of have fun with it. We've got these little pins in there with flags. And our eldest son made this when he was around 12 or 13. And he was writing where we had been across North America and different parts of the world. And he had them all color coded. You can see different flags. But what we would do when we were transferred, we would put a green pin in where we were, start, and a red pin where the destination was. And then we would take a ribbon or a piece of wool and connect the two. And that is the where visual, showing here, this was Comox to there, Ottawa. And then our children could imagine, we're not going there, we're not going there, we're going from there to there. And the where visual is the very first step in processing change. And I could see Eric quite often going up to the map and just putting his finger across it. We're moving there. So it wasn't abstract, it was concrete. The second one, and this reminds me of the countdown we were talking about before we started this session, the countdown to going to the lake. Well, you might want to try this one. This is another way to count down. And this is something my grade 2 teacher taught me a long time ago in Greenwood. And this helps to make the abstract concept of time concrete for children. And I love this one. And how much time until the spring house hunting trip? How much time until the posting? Well, you can show that. And what we would do is we would make this construction paper chain and hang it. And we would rip off a link every day, starting at the bottom and working up. And that would show how much time was left. And also time passing. You could see this getting shorter and shorter. We would do this for good things like vacations. and also things that were difficult and how much time do we have to sort of endure this. And this one is kind of funny. It's not really, but it says, how many days left till the end of grade 8? It was a difficult school year for my son, so we decided to count down toward the end. And this was very reassuring for him that it wasn't going to go on forever. So the bottom line here is representing time passing and time remaining is very grounding and reassuring. So here's a little excerpt. With about a month to go before our departure, we make a countdown chain. We cut and we staple and we dangle our masterpiece from the kitchen curtain rod. 30 links, multicolored, cascading to the floor like a storybook serpent. Each day we rip off one construction paper loop. Just watch these at the bottom here. There we go. And like a Christmas advent, we count down and we anticipate. So it became kind of a fun thing to do. And also it was a visual, how much time before the house hunting trip and then before our posting. So what we would also do when we received our posting was start to imagine what our next life is going to be like, what our new chapter is going to be like. And we would start to think about tourist activities and some of the highlights that we can look forward to in this new chapter. For example, when we moved to Halifax, we thought, oh, good, we can explore the waterfront, we can go to Peggy's Cove, we can go whale watching, we can pick blueberries, we can do things that we hadn't been able to do and enjoy being by the ocean. And so what we're doing is there's that frame again. We're starting to reframe the move as an adventure. And when we do that, it tames the sense of upheaval and uncertainty around relocating. So this whole business of, I told you it would be very handy, this reframing, it starts to shine light on positivity. Sorry, starts to shine positivity on the concept of change. Once again, our reaction set the tone and was the template for how our children responded to change. But we have to say, you know, this isn't easy. We have to be honest too, and talk about the stress and the sadness around uprooting and ask each other how we're feeling and what are we going to miss? Maybe around the dinner table, what will we miss about this life that we're living right now? For example, in Comox, in Ottawa, in Barrie, and share the emotion around that. I'm going to miss my friends. I'm going to miss doing these things. And we found that when we all talked about this, we all felt a great deal of relief because shared emotion helps us to manage change and makes us realize, oh, it's me. And that was really important for me to express to my son, Eric, with autism, because he thought it was just him feeling stuck. And although he did feel it probably 10 times more intensely, we said to him, no, we all feel this. So what we tried to do is take those heavy feelings and outweigh them by creating a bucket list of neat things that we were going to do before we left. Maybe places that we like to hike, places that we like to go for ice cream, drives, the beach, whatever. And so we were taking the heavy, hard sadness, anxiety, unpredictability, and we were outweighing that with what we were going to do before we left, and also looking forward to the new things we would be doing in our new life. So we kind of try to tip the scale. And the bottom line for me, the aha discovery, is that a bucket list helps to outweigh the anxiety around moving on. So we acknowledge it, but then we try to tip it. So that was the first step. That was the whole processing, receiving the posting message. And now there's that house hunting trip, typically around April. Because I have a son with autism, what I started to do was to look to where we were going, for example, Ottawa. And I remember writing to 2 families there, and I knew that they were supporting children with autism. And I asked them what they had found in the community, what were the resources, and they told me firsthand experience and about Autism Ontario and different organizations around the city. And that was very helpful for me. I also then went and Googled those and found other organizations. So for me, it was that sense of when I arrived in Ottawa, I was not starting at square one. I was using what they shared with me and starting further along. Something we also did before the house hunting trip was to create a checklist of the kinds of things that were important to each of us in a new home. And here we are outside of a home in house hunting in Ottawa, and our daughter was 8, Heather was 8, 10, and 12. And you'll notice that, and Eric does over there, they each have a little clipboard in their hand, and I'll talk about that in a moment. So we would ask them what's important, and Heather always wanted a pet, so she wanted a cat door. Eric likes nature nurture, so he was looking for trees in the yard and maybe to build a tree house. And our son Scott likes to play hockey and basketball, so he was looking for a large flat driveway. So they all had their impressions and their list of important things. So I took all of their things that are our points and created a checklist that we could use for each house. And if the kids didn't have time or didn't want to write very much or couldn't write, depending on their age, I could even write a bunch of things that they told me, and they could just circle it if they saw it or put an X through it. And you could make it into a game of I Spy. You could have pictures on there and not words, because words are probably not very effective. So make it kind of fun and make it easy to do for them. And so we would have the parents section of what we were looking for and the kids section on this. And they had fun with it. They felt very focused with this. And so we created this checklist, and then we ran off multiple copies and put it on their clipboards. The bottom line here is that involvement in decision-making is respectful. And it helps them to feel like they're invested in this move and not hijacked by the move, that they have a say in the house that we choose. This time we will strike out proactively and take all 3 kids on our spring house hunting trip, as we have done in the past, but this time we will make them an active part of the decision-making. Instead of depositing them at a sitter, we will have them come along from house to house, tiny clipboards in hand. We will immerse our children in this move. Look, you guys, I say, pulling out markers and notepads from a shopping bag a month before departure. We'll make a house hunting trip travel kit. You 3 will be like mini real estate helpers. We'll be a team. And this got them kind of excited about the move, that they were going to be like a professional real estate agent. Another thing that we always did was create a house hunting trip binder for ourselves as much as for the kids. The binder was one of those ones where you could put the clear pages in them, and we would put, for the house hunting trip, an overview of the week that we were going to be there and roughly what we were going to try to get done each day. Any hotel highlights like pool or water slide or breakfast or anything like that. The checklist that I talked about. A collection of the printed off of the houses we plan to look at. And also some of the tourist highlights in the area. I found that Eric, especially, my son with autism, would go through and through and through this binder looking at the plans, because it was helping him to transition in his mind and feel safe. Once we had found a home, we would take pictures inside and out to help us imagine where our furniture and belongings were going to go. Each child would take their own pictures, and at that time it was a little camera. Now, of course, it's their phones. And pictures of things that were important to each of them. You know, sometimes it amazed me what they took pictures of, things that I would never think of doing, like all the light switches. Where were they, and what did they activate? And good things, where were the electrical outlets, which was kind of handy to know. And views from different windows and the orientation, you know, where is the sun going to, you know, rise and set, or what, all things like that. And so each of us took our own pictures, and together we had a very good snapshot of our new home. And I found that if they can picture their new life, they can begin to imagine change. So they're there, they're on the ground, they're taking pictures, also not just of the house, inside and outside, but also of the neighborhood. That was important too. And the proximity to playgrounds and to rec centers, to schools, things like that. So that is the house hunting trip. Now we have to think that our child is in school and it's going to be really difficult to transition, pull up that arm from one school to the next. So how can we make that easier? Well, one of the best things that was prepared for us was something called A Day in the Life. And it was a learning support teacher here in Comox who did that for us. And this was above and beyond the regular papers that she was going to put together and send to Ottawa. This was beyond the IEP. And, you would typically have occupational therapy, speech and language pathology reports, psychological reports, all of that. But this was the real Eric. This was not Eric on paper. This was Eric on screen. And so they made this video and he just loved it and took clips of him following classroom routines. I think his educational assistant took the video and then someone edited the video and just put it together to make it short and move along quite quickly. Showing him interacting with other students and teachers, demonstrating his independence, going through the hallways and going to the office for something and packing his own backpack. It showed what he could do, but it also showed what he needed help with, the kinds of accommodations that would work well for him, like where he was sitting in the classroom, the visual schedules, the peer buddy that would help him stay organized, advanced organizers around the classroom, a quiet room where he could go if he needed time away. So all of these things were on the video. And the bottom line here was that these video clips allow the receiving school to observe the child outside the label. And they told me when they read the report about Eric and saw all of the report and anecdotal, but then saw the video, they saw a completely different child and far exceeding their expectations. So the walk through the day in the life was an excellent tool. Here's something that we always make, and it changes forms. As Eric got older, it became digital on his phone. We went from hard copy, I think this was grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. And every time he was going to a new school, we would go in and photograph every nuance of this school, inside and out. And Eric would take a lot of the pictures too. So pictures around the school, inside the school, how his classroom, his new classroom was going to be organized, the routines, the expectations, work and play stations, play options, student work on the wall, staff, safe havens in the school, quiet rooms, washrooms, drinking fountains. So he knew exactly where these were. Even, I say at the bottom, heat ducts. He wanted to see where the heat came out, and the light switches and the fire hydrants around the school. Those were all important things for him. And so when he was familiar with all of this, it made him very functional. Seeing is beginning to imagine the new school, and imagining is the next step toward actually being there and managing change. But I see this as priming the mind's eye. So this was grade 9, and this was high school, so it was in Ottawa, and the transition, I believe, yes, it was June. It was a very hot day in June, and Eric called it Sweaty Wednesday. And we showed up, and the poor EA took us around the school, preparing Eric for September. So we walked around, and Eric took pictures. We show up with our iPad, ready to record anything of interest or consequence. I cover the latter. And as we have done in the past, Eric takes care of the topics of interest, lockers and drinking fountains, and club signage and hallway plaques. As we hand the iPad back and forth, our eyes meet. I feel like we've done this before, I joke. Yeah, says Eric, my school's in iPad folders. He adores these snapshot tours. With each click, he gains control. Because that's what this is about, the translation from foreign to familiar. The pictures reassure him and later reaffirm what we have come to understand. Prime the mind and the body will step in line. So if we could prime his mind and make everything visual and make everything that we could think of known, he felt so much better. When we were at the school on the house hunting trip, we would also gather any newsletters, newspapers, and information about clubs. In the previous example about the iPad photo tour, I remember that the clubs were all in the front foyer in the glass display case, and there were samples of crystal growing and different things, not just sports clubs, but lots of activities as well. And I felt that for him to get a feel for the school was really important, all three of our kids, and for the leadership, the climate, and the kinds of activities, the spirit of the school. And by doing this, you give your child advanced knowledge and thinking time for them to begin to imagine themselves in that school and about how they might be participants in the school outside of the classroom. So this was important to do. We did this on the house hunting trip, and we also did it again at the end of the summer if we needed to update. We would try to meet the staff as well. And we're talking about all the staff that we could imagine, from the classroom teacher, the principal, the vice principal, learning support teacher, librarian, office staff, custodial staff, and take pictures of them. And this was on the house hunting trip. I have this one here for a reason, because we get stuck a lot. And I just want to tell you that. I mean, this is not a smooth move always. And it was never like this from the beginning. Of course, every move gets better because you learn from your past or you learn from other people. So I call these sticky moments in life, and especially on the autism journey, Grinch-in-the-Chimney Moments, because we get kind of stuck and they come first. And they're kind of like this too. It's a bit like whack-a-mole, where things pop up. Something might happen at school that you have to take care of or explain, or there may be a new therapy that you need to investigate, or something between siblings at home that you need to, okay, we need to calm that. So little fires are always needing to be put out. But by doing that, you learn. And the eureka moments, they come after. And I call this, the journey is not trial and error, but trial and learning. And it's another example of the reframe, whereas we're always learning something, and we have a family expression that we default to a lot. And it's, you never know what's good and what's bad. Sometimes the bad things offer good insight. And another one is, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do about it that really matters most in the end. And so these are the eurekas, these are the do about it's. That takes us to the fourth of 5 building blocks. And this is the actual move in the summer. So we've got the countdown chain again, and we continue to count down. There goes the pieces of the chain at the bottom. We count down to the day of departure. And this helps us to get all those things done on our bucket list and things that we need to do as well to get ready before the packers arrive. It's comforting and it's exciting. And this is all the anticipation. So we pre-pack and also do a road trip pack. Our 3 pre-pack their bedrooms by sorting items into Ziplocs. And I don't know how we live without Ziplocs, but we can't now. It also makes it so much easier at the other end. When you get to your location and the boxes are unpacked, things aren't rolling all over the place. They're in organized Ziplocs, all different sizes. And I think we got here 2 years ago and I still have things in Ziplocs and I just left them like that. And then we also make a generic packing list for the road trip. And we have each child pack their own travel bag. The packing list might have to be visual. You might have to draw in the things, but that's okay. And your child can tick those off as they pack. And they also pack a backpack. And you saw the picture of them on the BC ferry with their little pull bags. And those things have their favorite books, hand fidgets, and we'll talk about those in a moment, music, movies, whatever is going to offer comfort and make them feel safe and familiar. And we update the travel binder with summer trip details. So there's that binder that we use for the house hunting trip. Now we have a calendar that will detail our route across Canada or wherever we're going. And then we have a map too, showing our route. And we try to show the distance in kilometers and approximate time it will take each day. And the hotels are all booked. So, and we also look for things that we will do. Maybe there's some highlights en route that we'll see to make it more like a vacation, and the hotel bookings and anything else we need. I found especially Eric looking through this binder a lot in the van or the morning before we set out, and running his finger along this map that usually I had stickers on the little destinations. Very reassuring, and that safety again, smooth for us, safety for them. Thinking visually, I make Eric a travel binder, the first of many graphic diaries throughout the years to follow. Look, Eric, I say one afternoon after a pedal around the lake, I've made you a cross Canada travel book, your very own. Page 1, a map of Canada tucked into a clear folio sleeve, details our route. Numbered stickers on the plastic overlay show the overnight stops. Eric has an overview, and like a braille corridor, he closes his eyes and traces the route across the country, bump by bump, with his index finger. He does it again, eyes open this time. The happy sound kicks in. When Eric was happy, especially when he was younger, he would breathe through his nose, and it was a very nasal, almost like a yoga sound. And we knew he was really happy when he was doing that. So when he was looking through this book or the What's Not Allowed books or anything that he loved, we would hear the happy sound. And always with this binder, I heard the happy sound. So you will agree that your vehicle, in our case, our van, when you're moving, it's your home. And you don't have a home, you've sold that one, and haven't taken possession at the other end. So your van is your rolling home and your rolling safe haven. So we try to make it cozy and exciting, and we stock up on snacks and entertainment. We used to have years ago, 15 years ago, a video machine that would hang between the front seats. And I don't even think we didn't have a van with the video up top, but now of course kids all have their own devices. But blankets and pillows, magazines, travel games like Spot the on the way, and a movie device, as I said, now probably more individual devices, but sensory items. Now this was important because kids with autism have a lot of sensory disintegration, so it's hard for their senses to work together, and they become overloaded pretty easily. So I made all 3 of our children these lap cushions, and it was just kind of a fuzzy velour-ish cover. And then inside I made a separate little slip cover, filled it with like craft beads that were quite heavy. But some people had suggested putting, I think, beans or whatever, but if you've used real food, real grains, and they get wet, they start to sprout. So you don't want to do that. We learned the hard way. But so use some kind of beads that provide some weight, and it just feels very grounding to have that in your lap, almost like when you go to the dentist and they take an x-ray and they put the weighted blanket on you. It felt like that for him to have this in his lap in the van. And also these sensory fidget squeezy toys. I have one somewhere here, like a little cake. It just feels good to have something for your hands to do. And we learned that when the hands are busy, it calms and focuses the mind. So having some of those in the van was good. And it helped to create what we called a responsive oasis. And that was really grounding. These are a few of our favorite things. I've got something else to show you. We also have puppets. I'm going to put it on this hand here. This is a harbor seal puppet. And we have a family of 5 of them that we bought when we moved to Comox. I'm just going to show you. There's one there. And this was a really interesting thing. Using puppets was like a portal into Eric, and our kids, I should have brought more with me, but they would talk to one another through these puppets and look out the window with the puppets, and the puppets would be observing what they saw. And it was fun for them. And they would talk more with the puppets than without the puppets. And here's what I discovered, that they were unexpected points of entry into Eric especially. Wearing a harbor seal on his arm, Eric's word output quadruples. So he wasn't one to notice, or he noticed, but he didn't express what he noticed. But with a puppet on his arm, he did. So I called that a portal to potential, because it was a way into Eric of discovering what he was thinking. And I later learned that both puppets and costumes, and we'll talk about those in a moment, those are sort of exempt from social rules. When you're wearing a puppet on your arm and you make grammar rules, or you say the wrong word, or you might offend someone, puppets don't make mistakes. They're not judged. You can do whatever you want with a puppet. So Eric was a lot more free-flowing with the puppet than without the puppet, which intrigued me. I thought it was fascinating. So it was like turning on a language tap with him, with the puppets. So there's they called them the memes. I don't know why. I think they said that's the sound that harbor seals make. They say meme, but so we always called them the memes, and we always packed them, and we kept them. We still have them. We are uprooting and moving on, this time Ottawa bound, on Eric's 10th birthday. We celebrate as a family on the road. The pressure is off, the open highway is our backdrop, and for 10 floaty days, the van is our mobile home. And you know how great that feels, just free, and it can be quite an adventure. It's our transition safe haven between homes and between life chapters. So we wanted to make it quite special. So we're on the last building block now, and we're talking about building success in the new home. Bedroom. What we tried to do, especially with Eric, was to set up his new bedroom to look quite a bit like his previous bedroom. So it didn't feel like such a change for him. We replicate what has worked and we add updates as needed. For Eric, bringing the outdoors indoors created like a sanctuary because he loved leafy green nature nurture. So, oh, okay, there's a picture coming up. You're going to see, I thought it was this one. You'll see what we did. But what we're doing is we're creating safe spaces for our children behind their bedroom door. And replicating the previous bedroom was comforting and it felt familiar and safe. So I'll show you what that looked like. Kind of busy. When he was in Halifax and he was 3, 4, 5, we made this jungle room. And here he is in Comox and he's about 7, 8 here. And we tried to replicate parts of it. And you can just tell, I mean, I like decorating, so I'm not gonna pretend I don't, but we had this bed from IKEA. It wasn't a bunk bed, it's kind of a, yeah, almost a bunk bed, but you could have a mattress and kind of a safe space underneath. It's a bit of a jungle and savanna at the same time because we've got tigers, but we've also got leopards. So we've got India and Africa kind of combined here. And I would always just pin the wallpaper up because we were always moving, so I wouldn't make anything permanent. But when we had sound effects at that time, it was a cassette tape that sounded like the burbling, but you can get that on an app. And these were interesting. These were x-rays on the window because he was curious to know what creatures looked like inside. So we were kind of addressing everything that he loved, celebrating his interests and his sense of curiosity. To Eric's delight, we create a jungle bedroom for him, complete with a raised bed, lush leafy wallpaper, large plush animals, and secret areas to lounge and play. It is an outdoor oasis indoors. Something we noticed was when we first moved to Comox and we set this up, he spent a lot of time in there because it was difficult for him to try to integrate with the neighbor children. And so this was his safe spot. And something else, you'll see these pictures at the bottom, and he's dressed kind of all on the bottom, dressed like Peter Pan. Well, this went on for 3 or 4 years. And I got the hat still. It was, we call it Jungle Boy. And when he was in this room, he transformed into this character. And it was kind of like the puppets in that I've read this about children with autism, when they have a difficult time trying to sort out their own emotions and their own identity and know who they are, it's easier to attach to a fictional character or a superhero or something because you know the traits of that person or of that character, and you can understand that even when you can't understand yourself. So he became this Jungle Boy. And once again, it's kind of like being out for Halloween where all rules are thrown out the window and you don't have to worry about saying things that are completely appropriate or grammatically correct, because Jungle Boy, he's exempt from all of that. And it's not Eric, it's Jungle Boy. So this bedroom and Jungle Boy were probably, it helped him a lot. And then within those bedrooms, sometimes we would create even smaller spaces because kids like really small spaces when they're feeling stressed. So sensory safe spots when everything is new and different and overwhelming. Enclosed areas like decorated bedroom closets become clubhouses. So it's a safe zone. So they still have their clothes hanging down, but underneath they would put pictures and invite one another into their closets with little pillows on the floor. And cushion spaces under the bunk beds and themed tents, just a little pop-up tents you can get from IKEA or wherever, with cushions inside, and it just felt very safe and calming. Escape areas help to process change when things are overwhelming and new. What we also always tried to do was to take what we were doing, our systems and our traditions from our previous homes, and carry them through to the new home. Systems are the way we set up our home, and they feed that need for familiar structure. So for example, we would have a drawer in the kitchen with little containers in it with fruit cups and crackers and things that they could access a snack. We call it the snack drawer on their own. They didn't have to ask me for something, or it would help them to make their lunch as well. We also had the chore chart, which told them their responsibilities within the house. And we carried that through from one house to the next. And that kept things very consistent and familiar. There's also the traditions, the fun stuff that you do as a family. And it might be game and movie night. It might be every Sunday, you might have a pancake breakfast, or you might have a pizza night. We try to do that every house and evolve as the kids got older. But it was comforting, and it creates a predictable pattern, something that they can count on. We know that every Friday we're going to do this, or every Sunday we're going to do this. And it feels good when everything feels new and fluid. So systems and traditions carry forward what is important to each family. Of course, we try to play tourist in our own town, in our new town. Not always spend our days unpacking boxes and things like that, but to get out and see things and do things. And this invites a spirit of adventure. And it's that reframe again. We aim to cast the transition in a spirit of curiosity and discovery. And exploring the new location reframes change. There's that reframe again into something it's a positive thing. It's a fun thing. So this brings us to the end of the strategies. And just to recap, we're replacing what change erodes. And we're creating that soothing, safe, depending on the perspective that you take, environment for children. And we're also reframing change into something that's good and exciting. I like this expression, grow where you are planted. And I think in the military, we learn to do this. We become, I think, as we say, you know, we have to change a lot. We're on the move a lot. But one thing is certain, it makes us good at it. We become good at change, and we need to be good at change. We need to be resilient. And we've discovered that this last year, especially. As I mentioned, there are more ideas in the article called On the Road Again, Planning a Smooth Move for Children with Diverse Needs. And I think you received that with your registration. So if things moved on pretty quickly today, don't worry, all those ideas are in there, plus a few more. And I would like to thank the Comox MFRC. Thank you, Erin, and thank you, Tara, for this great idea, for inviting me to speak. And I was really happy to do this. It's something I've always wanted to do, and I think it's something you always wanted, so we combined in this. And thank you to the marketing people for creating some great posters. And I thank all of you for tuning in and for your attention. And I invite questions, comments, and some conversation. So I'm going to stop the screen share, and there we go. There we are. How are we for time? Oh, good. Yes, just what we thought. Good. So do we have any questions? Tara, I can't hear you. You have your muted. Oh, there you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, perfect. I just wanted to say thank you so much. What an amazing presentation. I myself learned so much today, so thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Teresa. I really appreciate it. Does anybody have any questions for Teresa?
I just want to thank her too. There's great ideas. I've been doing this for years. If anybody comes to Edmonton though, we have 10 school boards that people who are in the military access. So you might want to call before you go on a house hunting trip to find out which school board is best suited to be correct here.
Well, I know what you're saying, yes. Yeah.
There's some school boards that are just way more accepting or accessible or have lots more inclusive programs, all kinds of stuff. So before you go on your house hunting trip, because in Edmonton, depending on where you live, is where you have to go to school. Unless you're going to a segregated site and you're catching a bus for 2 hours away, that's huge important too.
That is a great point. And I know in Ottawa too, there were many schol boards, Catholic and public, and yes, there were quite a few. We didn't do that. We took a chance and it worked out. But then by the time they got to high school, all three of our kids went to quite a different high school experience. So we broke it down then, and we were able to get transportation. But you're exactly right. Different school boards will have sort of a different vibe, a different feel, a different take on diversity and how they would like to celebrate that and explore that. And that's worth looking into. That's a great point.
I like the pictures of the schools, so that's a good idea.
Which one?
The pictures, going in and taking pictures of the school.
You can never have too many. And then we would go back in at the end of the summer, and because, you know why we would go back in? Because Eric says, well, maybe things have changed, and I want to see how they've changed. And maybe the teacher has added more things. And, he's very, very observant and into details. And he would actually get down on the floor and take a picture from the perspective of the janitor's mop as well. So it was, the things that he wanted were completely not what I would have thought of. But, he added a little bit of humor into it, and he loved it. But pictures were great. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, so Glenn has a question. So he is moving to Yellowknife this summer, and he wants to know if you have any autism resources available up there that you know of.
I don't know. No, honestly, I don't. And so what do you recommend, MFRCs? What would he do?
Well, we can definitely contact the MFRC up there, and maybe they have some local resources on hand that can help. I can definitely write that down and get it to you, Glenn. That's not a problem.
Yes. If it were me, that's what I would do. I would go through the MFRC first, and then, as somebody once told me, a computer specialist, Google is your best friend. Honestly, Google, and start looking and making phone calls and writing letters. But like I said, if I could combine that with someone who had been there with on-the-ground knowledge and was a bit more discerning, that's always a good balance. If you can find somebody, yeah. But I'm sorry, I don't know. I've never been there, but it sounds like quite an adventure.
Tamara also has a question. She says, can I ask what school board did you find was more understanding in Ottawa?
Well, we lived in Manotick, so we were just south of the city, south of the airport, and it was the public school board, the OCDSB. It's called the Ottawa Carleton District School Board, and I think it depends, as as it goes down, it depends on the school and the atmosphere in the school, which trickles down from the principal and the vice principal. And so it was all people driven for us. And then it depends on the teacher. It depends on, so for me, it was less about a board and more about each person at each level. But really, it's very important to have a school that's headed by a principal where he or she is very open to diversity and into tapping into that student and celebrating that student. I know my elder son, Scott, he went to a high school called Bell in Ottawa that has a gifted program. And I loved it. As soon as you went into the building, it said, we're all welcome here and diversity. And it was just open to everything. Actually, all three of my kids' high schools. One was an art school, Canterbury in Ottawa, and that was open to everyone, and all different types of people were there and celebrated. It was really nice atmosphere. And then Eric went into called a learning disability program in high school. I didn't like the name of the program, but I loved the program. Small class size, and that was in Brookfield High School. Same thing, you walked in, it was a very multicultural school with all sorts of perspectives that were celebrated, and a big mural of people from all over the world. And it was just, all three of them had great vibes, and I felt that those were good choices for each of my children as they went into high school. So I think it really depends on the school, the principal, the learning support, the teacher. You just got to find the right people. Anything else?
Thank you, Teresa. We got a couple of questions here. So why are transitions so hard for children with autism?
Transitions, yeah, they really are. And I think I was just watching a panel of autistic self-advocates, people that are in their 20s, and they were asked what's the most difficult thing for them, and all of them said change, transitions. And the way it's been explained to me, another visual, is that it's very hard for people with autism to get going onto something, but almost overcome inertia. But once they get going, it's like a slow moving but very heavy freight train. And if you ask them without any warning to stop that train, it's really hard. It just keeps going. And it's very irritating because they just got focused, and there's often very fine focus. And then you're asking them to switch a track. Well, that's really hard. And so that's what we're showing throughout the toolkit, is always giving them a visual, and that's helping them to transition. It could be the map, it's the where, the chain is how much time, the school pictures, the home pictures, the binder for across the country. We're giving them time we're giving them little buffers between the changes, and we're giving them the ability to transition. And I know in Ottawa, I used to go around to homes of children with autism and talk to the parents, and we used to troubleshoot. And almost every question they had for me was about a transition. And we didn't realize it until we started talking about it. It was going to bed at night, getting up in the morning, coming to the dinner table, going to school, changing out of clothes, and that's a transition into different clothes. Everything was about a transition. So we always try to make that easier, which is what we're trying to do with the toolkit, make it easier for them to slow down that train.
Just a couple more questions, if you don't mind. So what happens when things goes wrong on the house hunting trip? Like when kids are acting up, when you're looking at the houses, like how do you handle that kind of situation?
Well, and they did go wrong. And one of them was almost humorous. Well, almost. We had them all with their clipboards, and it all was going well. We were in the backyard, and our eldest son decided to test the ice on the surface of the pool, and he nearly fell in the pool. His foot went right through, and he was wet, and I thought, oh no. And I questioned my decision to bring them many times. On the PowerPoint, it looked perfect, but in real life, I thought, was this a good idea? So what you can do is maybe not take them to all the homes, narrow it down perhaps to the last 3 or the last 2, the last 1 even. It depends, age and stage. Also, oh yes, we always had a backup. We always had the van that we rented on the house hunting trip in the driveway, with movies, with snacks, with the sensory things. And if things went on too long, out they would go to the van, and they knew that. And if our oldest son was 15 or 12, I think, he could be the babysitter. It was fine to leave them there, and they knew they were safe, and we knew where they were. If they were younger, I would have to go and sit with them. But so I think we were always had a plan B, always had the van, and we let them know if this seems to be dragging on too long, you can just go out in the driveway, and you can do your little checklist there and then just chill. I think there was a lot of SpongeBob. I remember that. That was our default. They watched a lot of SpongeBob. So. Anything else?
Does anybody have any more questions?
I just want to know if I can share the handout. I have 2 families that wanted to come, but they are in current school divisions that are now doing homeschooling. And so those moms are now teachers without EAs. And so they needed to be doing that, not this. So I said, I can. Oh, thank you. Because your notes are much better than mine.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
And we'll ensure that the presentation, once it's posted on YouTube, is sent to everyone, because it probably would be of value for them to watch it as well.
And like I said to you, Erin and Tara, I can translate the PowerPoint into a PDF and send it to you as well. And that I think would be a good complement to the article, because the PowerPoint is a little bit more human with, you know, examples of stories and things like that, instead of just pointers. I think you need to humanize it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just had one more question, if you don't mind. So you mentioned in your presentation about the checklist. Like from the child's perspective, what did you have on those checklists?
Well, we kind of, it was what from looking at what they were interested in, it sort of sorted itself into outside and inside and neighborhood. Inside the house, they wanted to know where their bedrooms were in relation to each other, and whether they had their own bedroom, of course, and they usually did. But for example, in one of our houses, all the bedrooms were downstairs. That was unusual here in Comox, and the playroom and just the kids' bedrooms. And we thought that was a problem at first, and ours was upstairs. And then we found that that was actually a solution. That was a good thing. and they liked it too. So they wanted to know where their bedrooms were, how close their bedrooms were to the bathroom, because one of them had to get up more during the night. And where was that bedroom in relation to like a playroom, and how was it all going to look? Outside, like I said, Eric was really interested in, and still is, in nature nurture, because it calms him. And so does the house have trees, and what kind of yard is it? And Scott was more into hockey and basketball, and is there a space to do that? And is there a big flat driveway? And are there kids in the neighborhood? And how close are the houses? And all of those things we would write down. And within the neighborhood, are there parks nearby? Or how can I walk to school? Will we bus to school? What else? Playgrounds, rec center, all of those things, the amenities around the house. So it kind of started small inside, then outside, and then neighborhood. Like I said, quite often we would just have little drawings and they could circle it. And it depended on their age and stage and all of that. But they loved those clipboards. They absolutely loved them. And they just felt so important. It's like giving someone a name tag or a business card. They just felt like they were invested. And they tell me now they're 20, 22, and 24, that they really appreciated that and they love that. And they laugh at Scott falling in the pool and all that, but you know, that's part of the family lore as well. But it just made them feel respected. And I think that's the bottom line.
And I think regardless of what age the child is, or if they have diverse needs or not, a checklist is an absolutely great thing. I wish I would have thought of that. We've done 9 military moves, and geez, wow. I wish I would have been that smart.
Well, I think it was my daughter's idea, because she really wanted a cat. And so did the house have a cat door? That was what I forgot to say. And we ended up getting a cat because we found a little cat door and all that. So, but it was her that wanted to know. And you know, you've probably been thinking too, as you see all these strategies, this is for all of us. We all need to know. And I think we figured this out through the pandemic. We all are always relating to our environment. And wow, it really sent us for a loop this last year. That's what it must feel like to have autism all the time, you know? And so this is about all of us, and we're all somewhere on that spectrum of needing predictability, certainty, and rules and structure. But our kids with autism and neurodiverse needs it even more, and it's critical, is that times 10 thing. So it works for everyone.
Tamara has a question.
Yep.
Hi, yeah, I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the medical side of things. So like when you move, you lose your family doctor, you lose your support team. So like our speech or OT, all of these things. And then like anywhere we've moved, it's always been wait lists, and sometimes year-long wait lists. And for me, that's unacceptable and very difficult to navigate. And I was wondering if you have any tips about that.
I'm not sure if I have tips, but I certainly have experience and I understand what you're saying. And that's part of that tentacled arm. And that's part of why I just slump every time. I used to when we were moving. I thought, oh no, I just got this set up. I guess it all, you know, all I can say is it depends. It depends on where you're going and, you know, a small town or a city. And I think there's always going to be wait lists around autism services, but maybe you can find, often what I found is when I couldn't get these right away, I would try to access them through school and the occupational therapy and especially and speech and language and get updated psychological assessments through the school as well. So if you can start that route, because they do have all of those professionals as part of their multidisciplinary teams. And then they might be able to give you tips on who, because they know them all, who might be available or accepting clients. So that's what we often did, started with the school. Ottawa, there, you know, Autism Ontario was great, the chapter at helping us access that. Children at Risk in Ottawa was very helpful. I guess I would just keep asking around, but start at the school. But Tamara, I understand what you're saying, and that was always our challenge as well. And I felt like on that game board, there was a lot of snakes, right? We were sliding back a lot. Yeah.
And we just have a lot of families who come and they were on the wait list to get assessed.
Yes.
So they used the Sun Life assessment, and we kind of figured out when they needed their receipt and had all the SOT, the supporter troops, covers 750 of an assessment on top of like after Sun Life. So once they got that assessment, they got services much faster because it's really hard to argue with an assessment.
Yes, yes.
So that's another option, is to look at the supporter troops.
Okay, wonderful.
Might help. And Sun Life covers, I think, up to $1,000 just from the recent families. And lots of people will figure it out because in Alberta schools, there's no, those guys are all swamped to do assessments. Yeah, it's tough. But it's an option.
That is a good point. I didn't know about that. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, and they'll even pay for some like physio or OT or, you know, up to a certain amount of money. But at least it gets you started. It gives somebody to come tell you what would help, and then you can do it for the next couple of weeks kind of thing. So
yes, I think this is probably the experience of Tamara and Glenn and others, and Cheryl. I'm not sure if you have a child with autism, but quite often I was the one. I was the therapist. I was the glue as we were waiting for all these other things to come on board. And because I'm a teacher, that was part of what I would do anyway. But I just found that I had to keep filling in these gaps when things didn't work out on the outside. And eventually we got a balance, and it was always a combination though of outside services and everything that we could do in the home to provide all of those things that Eric needed. Yeah. And always to celebrate. If I had to say, I'm always told, what advice would I give to parents? Go through their strengths, keep celebrating everything that they're showing you. Eric liked objects and shadows, so we made objects and shadow cards, which he loved. The What's Not Allowed books, the jungle, everything that he loved, we made into a family project, and that made him feel really esteemed and really good. And then we started to address his struggles, his, you know, wanting to form relationships and difficulty doing that through him talking about what he loved. And so if we could keep him in our world through his interests, that works very well. It's exhausting, but it's fun too, because these things can be a bit obsessive, you know, chasing these interests, but it's fun in the end. But it's difficult. It's a hard journey. I won't, you know, and it's continuing.
I just wanted to say, Teresa, I think what you're highlighting is really important. I'm not a parent of a child with autism, but I'm a social worker who supports our military families here in Esquimalt with a range of neurodiversities, including autism. I think what you're highlighting is learning that road to advocacy, because many of our families will traverse different areas, different provinces, and unfortunately, all our medical systems and the assessments that we need are delivered provincially. So the more as you know, it is tiring for families to do that, the more it looks the same wherever they go, and the tools they need to traverse that journey is the same. So I think it's really important. Tamara, you asked about how to form your team again. I think reaching out to the MFRC, we're lucky that way. We're interconnected, where we can make those warm transfers and warm handovers to other areas. I do recommend, because of COVID, I don't know what it looks like in other provinces, but here on Vancouver Island, our wait for a public autism assessment is now 15 to 18 months for a child 6 and under. So we are lucky when we have those conversations. Like Brenda mentioned, we can tap into our Sun Life and the Support Our Troops to get that autism assessment or other psychological assessments, even that other kids need for schools. We're thankful we have that, because without that, parents are kind of wondering, and where do I go? How do I get this? So I think you've highlighted something really important, Teresa, is that as difficult as it is for parents to start learning those languages of advocacy, where are the supports, where's my services, is something that a parent is always going to have to do. And you become the best advocate. You know your child. Like you just highlighted, you highlighted Eric's strengths. That's really important for professionals to know that, because we tend to, and other services tend to look at the deficits, what's missing, when the strengths are something to pull on. So I'm really glad to hear you say that. And I think it's a two-way street, is always forming part of your team, Tamara, with other parents too, because they've traveled that road. They can take some of that anxiety and angst away from, well, what else is out there? And I think with social media, we're really fortunate. We can tap into different social media groups and different parent groups. And with the MFRCs, we can always do that warm handover to another MFRC.
No, all great stuff, Cheryl. And I'm going to take what you said and just take it even one step further. Thank you for talking about advocacy. And, I didn't decide to become an advocate. You get chosen. Autism chooses you, right?
That's right.
Yeah. But then what I found is at a certain point, I had to hand over those reins to Eric. I had to do that. And as much as he can, and teach him how. And we would role play, and he would write things in his agenda, and I would help him write the emails, the text messages, everything to his team at school, his teachers, and get him to do it. And that was a huge, huge shift for me to learn how to do that, because it was easier, faster if I did it. But he has to learn how to do that and speak for himself. And he has to learn his own learning style and what he needs to succeed. And you also made another great point, and Tamara, this is what I might have said and I should have said, and thank you for reminding me, Cheryl, the parent groups. And always found them in each place, and I think so much was learned from those parent groups. We shared ideas just like we're doing right now, and everybody had their own little discoveries, and together we were always better. We hear that a lot now, but it's so true. And so I would hear about maybe OTs that were accepting new clients, or speech and language pathologists that they would recommend, or different programs and different workshops, different speakers. And another thing for me that was a huge thing to do was when we got funding here in BC when Eric was diagnosed, was for me to learn as much as I could about autism, and to go to every workshop, local, provincially, whatever. And as we moved across Canada, and the more I knew, the more I understood him, and I was able to stand in his shoes. So the parent groups, the advocacy, the teaching, self-advocacy, all huge. So thank you.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And for my son, by the time he hit high school, he was really good at sharing what I would think and how he should. Well, just because he grew up around inclusion, and he didn't get why other people would want to be in the far end of the school. That made no sense to him. So he actually asked a special ed teacher, did the rest of the kids not like anybody in this class because they're so far away? I could have kissed them. I would have gotten there if I did that, but you know what? Teachers listen to him way more than they listen to me.
Yes.
So I'm just this witch sometimes, like not all the time, but when he spoke with, and then when he was really hurt, it would come out and they would do whatever they could to make sure his school life was good and that he wanted to come to school. So he had way more power than I ever would, which is good. I'm glad, because it serves him well as a adult.
Yeah, well, absolutely, Brenda. And I'm your sister witch. You know, I can be denied and I can be ignored, and there she is again. Oh no, here she comes. But never with Eric, you know. And he's a lovely person, and he just is very humble and very sweet, and he's telling them what he needs, and they can't ignore that. So I think teaching our children, empowering them, role playing, and it takes a lot of work. But I have to tell you one quick story. I remember coming home from a meeting one night, and there were 3 notes on the kitchen counter, and there were letters to his high school teacher, and they're all almost the same. And I said, well, what is this? And he said, and there was a note by it, which one is the best? And it was 3 notes about how to start the project. And he said, well, it's kind of like the 3 bears. I think this one is too bossy, and I think this one is too nice, kind of wimpy, he said, but this one is just perfect. And did I agree? And I did. And so he was learning how to advocate, but not only say what he needed to say, but say it in the right way in order to get results. And it took him all night to write these notes, and he didn't get his assignment done, but it was a really good lesson. I thought it was kind of cute.
Does anybody else have any more questions before we wrap up the presentation?
Just a huge thank you to Teresa and Comox. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you to everyone. And Cheryl, thanks for jumping in, and Tamara and Glenn and everyone. I know this has been our experience. The more we share these things, the more perspectives on this, the better it's going to be. And it just keeps growing. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank everybody for coming and joining. And thank you so much, Teresa, for offering us all these wonderful strategies. Honestly, I've learned so much today. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
Great.